Hello, and welcome to this episode of MyDiabetesHQ Live. Hello, my name is Reva Verma. I am the CEO of Reneka Digital, and I am also a CCD Houston core team member. I will be your host today. It's tough enough to find your soulmate under the best of circumstances. When you have a chronic disease like diabetes, dating becomes even more complicated. Try explaining to your date why you have to run to the bathroom to test your blood sugar before a meal or take a pump bolus, count carbs during dinner, or eat before you go for a walk. There's a good chance they won't get it. However, that doesn't mean that you can't date successfully. Today we hope to share a few tips to make the dating experience more compatible and enjoyable while living with diabetes. Today's episode is coming up right now. You don't want to miss this. Before we begin, a gentle reminder. The content shared during the MyDiabetesHQ Live broadcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the counsel of your physician or other qualified health provider with the questions you may have regarding your medical care. This weekly broadcast is developed and produced by Cities Changing Diabetes volunteers in Houston and Philadelphia. Our two cities are the U.S. members of a global network of 36 cities working to improve diabetes prevention, care, and management. You can learn more about Cities Changing Diabetes by going to citieschangingdiabetes.com. The purpose of MyDiabetesHQ Live is to help people with diabetes and their support teams. So let's get started. I am joined today by the one and only Serena Valentine, the Executive Director of Core Initiative, Project Lead for the Houston Diabetes Peer Support Program, and CCD Houston Core Team member. Hi, Serena.
Good morning, Reva.
How are you?
I'm good. Ready
to jump in and let's talk about dating?
Yeah.
So I wanted to start it off by, let's do the umbrella question. How comfortable are you sharing your diabetes in general? Is this different when you date someone? How do you go about it?
I used to be really afraid to share. I don't care. I mean, I get on MyDiabetesHQ and talk about my life all the time. So, I don't care about sharing. It's become my badge I wear.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to be kind of scared to share because I didn't know what the other person would think about me, or if they would think, oh, you must be a sickly person, and kind of change their mind about being with me. But now I'm just like, hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar. I share it like it's a badge of honor as well. It shows that I'm resilient. It shows that I have discipline. I know the ins and outs of how to take care of myself. So I almost feel like it's a good thing to share with someone, to be like, look, I'm a responsible human being and I can get through life with hardships and it's not going to bring me down. So it's almost like my selling point, if that makes sense. I'm like, hey, look, I can take care of myself,
Yeah.
But I also have been hesitant in situations. For example, my boyfriend now, he comes from a very medical background, like all his brothers, his parents, they're all doctors. So knowing that and them having personal experience with people living with diabetes, it was almost kind of intimidating for me because they knew the bad side of diabetes too. What happens if you have, not the best of control, and, they're used to seeing people with amputations and being in the hospital regularly. So for me, I almost felt like I had to prove myself in that situation, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, you know, I do think that you and I both are big advocates for people living with diabetes. And so when you first meet someone, it's not something that neither of us shy away from sharing that we do live with this disease.
Right, right, right. I had to learn how to, over the years, I just come out with it because I've had a couple experiences that I waited to say, oh, I have diabetes, or waited until he asked the question, well, why do you do that? And why do you kind of sneak off to the restroom? And why do you do this? Why do you do that? So then I brought it up, and then it was like, oh, so you're sick all the time. And it was like, what?
Mm-hmm. Those are
What do
those
you mean?
misconceptions, like people
Mhm.
automatically when they hear diabetes, they're like, I don't want to, like it almost, they feel like, yeah, this person is sick all the time, or this could be a burden situation. So, in that aspect, I think it is difficult because I do feel like we have to prove ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And it's sometimes you spend forever proving yourself and you just get tired. You're like, look, this is my life. If
Mhm.
this is something you don't want to be a part of, let me know now. And
Yeah,
so I can move on about mine, because I'm not going to be, that's added stress,
right.
which we always talk about we don't need. So,
So
yeah.
when you do encounter those situations, how do you combat that? Like when you are dating someone, at what point do you ask them, is this something you're willing to be okay with? How do you see this integrating into your life? How do you go about that?
Now it's at the beginning. Like when guys start, when if I meet a guy and we talk on the phone, we have conversation, and it honestly, for me, it comes up anyway, because when someone asks me, well, what do you do? Well, I help people with diabetes.
Right.
I help people living with diabetes. And oh, how did you get into that? Well, I myself have. It kind of comes in anyway because of what I do. So we have to talk about it, and I have to be like, well, so how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts? Do you know anyone with diabetes? And so it comes up anyway at the beginning.
Yeah, and then they're like, "Oh, well, my mom had it, my grandmother
Hmm.
has it." So it is also like a conversation starter, which helps, like get to know someone and their background a little more.
Hmm. Hmm. For sure. Yeah.
So, what do you look for in a partner? Do you think this has changed as you've become more comfortable and as like a peer support leader and you hear other people's experiences? How has that changed for you over the years?
For me, patience is a virtue. Like, I'm gonna need for you to be patient, because you might the other person that's with you, they might experience things they've never experienced before, and it might freak them out. I was dating one guy, he was terrified of needles. So even after I told him that I had diabetes, I had to check my blood sugar and all of that. And when I actually did it, he was like, oh, you can go ahead, you can do it in front of me. And I'm like, okay. So when I actually did it, he was like, I'm gonna walk out of the room. It just kind of like every single time. And I told him, I say, is this very uncomfortable for you? Like, let me know that. Like, don't just act like you're just gonna, keep it to yourself and
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, yeah. So
So, how do you express your needs in a relationship? This is something that I have personally struggled with. So, I'm interested to see how you would advise on this topic.
um well, a lot of times, I'm so forthcoming, Reva. I just talk. I just open my mouth. And so sometimes I might share too much. I try
Mhm.
not to try to push people away, but I do, when if I'm dating someone, I do talk to them about, well, hey, uh, this is what I need from you. I need for you to be patient. I need for you to be compassionate, and I need for you to watch me, pay attention to detail. Like, You know, and then that's when I go into telling them, okay, if I start acting like I'm upset or angry or anything like that, pay attention, like get your antennas on, because
Yeah.
something might be going on with me. You know, don't immediately, you know, things could easily turn to an argument,
Yeah.
small things.
Right.
And it could just be because you're hungry.
Yeah.
It's time to eat, your blood sugar's low, and you're agitated. And, you know, so, you know, those kind of things are important to me. Like, I need for you to pay attention to me in that way.
Yeah.
And so, I've had instances where I would even tell someone, hey, this is what you do when if my blood sugar gets way too low. It's hard for me to think, I'm confused. So you're gonna have to, you know, help me out with that. And sometimes they comply, sometimes they're freaked out in the moment. So
Right. Well, I have struggled with the compassionate part that you mentioned. Like, when I go into a relationship, I'm trying to show that I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need any help. I can do this myself.
Yeah.
But, you know, at the end of the day, diabetes needs a support network. And if that person is going to be in a very close relationship with you, they need to know the ins and outs of how can I be supportive without overbearing. You know, we've talked about that in previous episodes, like as far as like caregiver type of roles, but your romantic partner plays a role as well. And it's like you talked about, you know, hey, if I start acting funny, like don't jump to the conclusion of, oh, we're going to get in a fight. That particular point has been something that has been challenging for me in my relationship, because it's been like, overall, I'm pretty well controlled. But you know, if we've eaten like high carb meals or I haven't eaten for long periods of time and I'm hungry, but I haven't paused to be like, why am I like feeling agitated? Like it could be I'm hungry, like how you were explaining. So that has been something where I've had to express like, look, if I don't eat for long periods of time and we're about to get in like a small argument, maybe we should eat first before we have a conversation.
Yeah.
Or if you just ate pizza because you really wanted that pizza and I was like, okay, and I did bolus for it, but I still have that spike. If I'm kind of irritated and I have a headache, give me a minute, you know? Don't jump down my throat and be like, Reva, you're overreacting, you know? I'm like, that's my biggest pet peeve. Reva, you're overreacting. I'm like, well, maybe I am, but maybe I'm not. Let's look at my behavior, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That can be difficult to translate what's going on, especially if you're in the moment. I had one instance, I was out with someone, and this was years ago. I was out with someone, and I had been waiting to eat because normally I eat dinner. I try to eat dinner before 6, but this was going to be a late dinner. So by the time, you know, he picks me up, I get in the car, I'm like, okay, we're going to go eat, right? We're going to go eat. And so he's like, yeah, I just wanted to stop by here and I want to get this and get that. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like sitting on my hands like this and I'm getting agitated now. So I'm like, okay, isn't it time for us to go eat? He's like, oh, it'll be okay. I just want to, you know, trying to do overly romantic things.
Yeah, and you're
taking me
like,
around to different places. I'm like, we can do that after I eat. So I kind of got really upset after the 4th time of me saying I'm hungry, I'm ready to eat. I'm like, look, we need to stop somewhere so I can get something because I'm hungry. My blood sugar is getting low.
Yeah.
And so he was like, oh, but I mean, we're on our way there now. And the place was like 30 minutes away. So what I did was I pulled out my monitor, I checked my blood sugar, and I showed it to him. It was 65. Yeah. And so at that level is when my body starts to go into panic mode. And I'm like, we need to stop now. And then, you know, afterwards, he was kind of apologizing. But I was like, that's what I'm saying. Like, if I tell you I need to, like, we're gonna go eat, right? That means make your way to the food.
But you know, like sometimes show and tell is the best form of communicating your needs, which transitions kind of into my next question of, you know, at what point do you kind of integrate them into your care? So, for example, if you wear a continuous glucose monitor, when do you share that data with them? When do you, you know, like invite them to your peer support group? When do you invite them to these advocacy efforts that I'm into? You know, like how do you start? At what point do you start integrating them into your care, and how has that been received in the past?
Okay, well, now that I think about it, I would do that if we're starting to hang out all the time. Then I'm gonna need, because if you're just going on a date every now and then, once this week and maybe 2 weeks another date, and then maybe in a week another date, then it's easy for me to hide it, right? I can make sure before that date I'm okay. But if we're hanging out at least once every week, once or more every week, then it's time for us to have a talk, because there may be times that I had a busy day and my day kind of started off kind of funky, and then the rest of the day time schedule demolished and I'm having some issues. So yeah, if we're hanging out all the time, then we need to talk.
Yeah. I agree. I only recently started sharing sensor data and in my relationship, and it's been good and challenging. You know, since he's never dealt with someone in a relationship with diabetes, he's kind of like, oh, are you okay? Like your blood sugar is kind of like dropping a little, you're spiking a little, like almost like hovering mode. So we had to have a few conversations where we're like, it's time to like, yeah, I gave it to you for emergencies, not to be like all up in my business.
AKA back off a little bit, just a little bit.
But at the end of the day, it just means they care. So it's been well received. So that's good.
Right.
Do you date or have you dated another person living with diabetes?
One time.
Really?
But one time I did. And it wasn't that because he had diabetes, I decided that it was okay to date him. He didn't want to tell me. It's like I found out because I was watching him. And so when he would get agitated and then he'd be like, oh, I just need something to eat. He was one of those that was not really trying to control it. And he was kind of a bad influence in the way, I say a bad influence in that aspect, because he would be like, hey, let's go get this. He'd always get these foods that I really should not be eating on a regular basis every day, like every single day. And I'd be like, come on now, you trying to just make me sick, you know? And but yeah, he didn't tell me until a year.
Okay.
But it was like I started seeing certain signs, and like I could tell when it was time for him to eat. It would be to the point of him just sweating for no reason. It'd be cool outside and he'd just be sweating. I'm like, are you okay? Oh yeah, I'm good. I just need to get something to eat. And I'm like,
he has low blood sugar.
Yeah, let's talk. I'm like, have you been to the doctor? Yeah, I've been to the doctor. So do you have diabetes? And it's like, I didn't want to say anything. I'm like, but I told you a long time ago. Like that should be the time to be like, well, you know what? Me too. But yeah, that's how it.
So looking back on that experience, do you know what reservations he possibly, because the reason I'm asking this is because you and I are kind of like, hey, we have diabetes, take it or leave it, like we're out here owning it. But if you look at your experience with the person that you just described, I'm sure a lot of people feel the way he feels. They don't want to come forward and say, I have diabetes, even while dating someone who has been vocal about having diabetes. So what do you think his reservations were? What is it that was keeping him from sharing such a personal thing about himself?
Oh, I can tell you what it was, because he was one of those people that love food, right?
Okay.
So if you don't tell me that you are dealing with diabetes, then I can't, there's no reason for me to just be asking, you should be eating that every day, sometimes, okay. Just and not, I tried not to nitpick with him because I know how that feels. But he was just kind of going overboard. And so he's like, see, that's why I didn't want to tell you, because I didn't want you in my business. And it's like, in your business? What do you mean by that? So it was a license for him to do what he wanted to do because he didn't tell me what he had.
So it was an acceptance issue.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Let's see. How did you feel the first time you had to ask your partner to assist you in a medical emergency?
It was a whole bunch of feelings at the same time. On one end, it was help me. On the other end, it was, why am I asking you? You don't know what to do. And it partially, I would, after the fact, I would blame myself because I didn't properly tell that person, okay, this is what you do, until it happened. Sometimes you don't know that it's going to happen until it does. And you're like, okay, we'll sit down and have a sit down about that later. But if you know you're going to be hanging with this person, you really should discuss this stuff with them so that they won't be freaking out either, because two people who are freaked out at the same time, no one has a cool head. The emergency kind of becomes compounded, and things can get worse. So I just think that the sooner you can, I think when you have the conversation about, I have diabetes, not load everything at once, but kind of do it in spurts. So, because it's a lot to remember.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've said it before. You make hundreds of millions of diabetes decisions all the time. There's always decisions to be made. And I had this personal experience where I was like running low in the middle of the night, and I couldn't, I would have to get up, get to the kitchen, and get juice, and I just felt like I had dropped so low. And I was like, wake up, wake up, wake up. And they're like, leave me alone. Reva, Reva, you go deal with it. I'm like, no. So I ended up dealing with it myself and getting juice, and everything worked out for the best, thankfully. But afterwards, the next day, I was like, can we have a conversation about this? I feel weird having to ask you for this, but I also feel like if I don't ask for it, it could have turned out differently, in a dangerous way. And I was like, sometimes in the middle of the night, my blood sugar drops and I need help because I'm asleep. So I've obviously waited too long, or I've slept through my CGM alarm blaring. That happens sometimes, And he was like, oh my gosh, I feel like an awful person. I'm so sorry. Yes, of course. So now the nightstand is stocked with little juice boxes.
Yeah.
It's good, at least a positive came out of it. But it was weird that I felt like I had to explain myself, and I felt guilty in some way. But at the end of the day, if that person wants to be with you, they should understand, they need to be there for those types of situations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So transitioning now to intimacy. Are you ready for this?
Sure. Wow.
Do you feel like there's a need to talk to your physician about your technology and intimacy, or is it something you just deal with ad hoc?
Well, I think, well, see, I'm a type 2, and
Right.
so I don't wear a pump.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I
I
guess
don't,
from your peer support group, have you heard of people talking about intimacy?
not too much because some
Okay.
people are kind of, they
Shy.
think that's something that they should not talk about to other people. But most for the most part, when it comes to stuff like that, I did one time when I was doing in person. This was pre-pandemic. A wife and a husband came in, and they were kind of just, they're kind of quiet during the the peer support thing. And so after the meeting, they stayed around, and the wife came to me and she was like, I really want to ask you something, but I don't know how to ask you.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, what is it? And she's like, well, um, I just wanted to know. She said, I heard you talk about the reproductive system and how diabetes affects it. And she's like, we're having some. So I'm like, oh, okay. I
Mhm.
was like, I need to uh, introduce you to a healthcare professional that can help you with that. But yes, diabetes does affect that. I hadn't heard anything when it came to the hardware, like, like the pump or anything like that, because most of the people that come to peer support have type 2. So I think we would defer to you on that, Reva.
Yeah, so I think it's preparation that plays a part into it. You should know your blood sugar going into the situation and maybe have it a little more elevated, or at least have your nightstand stocked, like how we were talking about having juice by your side, so that you can take your pump off for like short periods of time, as long as you remember to put it back on. It is it it's you don't want that to be the issue when you're trying to connect with your partner. And if you got tubing and pumps being ripped out, like, it's painful and it's like not enjoyable. So as long as you prepare going into the situation and making sure your blood sugar is stable, you can take your pump off for short periods of time.
Mhm.
Um, Something that I wanted to talk about though is diabetes does play a part in your sexual health for both men and women. So a lot of women living with diabetes will say, I I have painful sex, and a lot of men will say, well, I'm experiencing erectile dysfunction. These are things that are common and people do not talk about from people living with diabetes, and you should talk to your doctor if you're experiencing those issues, because blood sugars do play a part in that, and maybe there are different options for you to talk about with your physician in order to, not have that be an additional thing you have to worry about with your diabetes. Intimacy with your partner is important, but that's another thing to explain to your partner if y'all are having issues that it could be diabetes related, and you need compassion and empathy in that situation to figure out solutions. And that means better blood sugar management. It means asking your doctor for different options, and I think going to peer support groups and asking people what works for them too. Being able to have open conversations about these issues.
Right, right. And I'll tell you a
Mhm.
very short, but eye-opening experience I had with someone in peer support.
Mhm.
So it was a lady. This was an in-person again. This is a different lady. She was coming to my peer support meetings, and so she was started to talk about how stressed out she was,
Mhm.
and she was having problems at home.
Mhm.
So after a meeting, I would sit and talk with her. I'm like, "Are you okay?" I'm just stressed out because I think my husband's cheating on me. And I'm like, why
Oh
do you
no.
say that? I'm like, why? She said, well, I told her, I said, did you talk to him about it? She's like, yeah, but he won't talk to me about it. And I think he's cheating on me with this person and that person and that person. And I told her, I said, so are y'all, I said, this stress is not good for you. And she's like, well, I'm sure it's not good for him either, because he's diabetic too, but he won't come. He won't come to peer support with me. So I said, oh, he has diabetes too. I told her, I said, do you know that diabetes does affect your
Yeah.
sexual health? I said, it is possible that he doesn't want to talk about it because he's not sure what's going on, and that it may not be another person at all.
Yeah.
And so she just looked at me with this blank stare, like, and she said, and I've been like fighting with him. We've been fighting almost every day. And I'm like, well, you need to go have a talk with your husband, and y'all need to go to the doctor,
Yes.
because that could be something. And when she came back to me, she was like, thank you so much for talking to me. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So it's like, and both of them are people living with diabetes.
Right.
She
And
just
like
didn't know how diabetes affects men. So
yeah. I mean, people just like it's not talked about. It's not an open conversation about how diabetes does affect your sexual health. And it ultimately, if it does, it's affecting your relationship. So I'm really glad you shared that story. Like that just validates what we were talking about.
for sure. Yeah.
So, lastly, let's talk about prepping for a date. Like there are different types of dates. There's active dates, there's dining out dates, there's drinking alcohol, and then there's taking your supplies along for like sleepovers or extended stays somewhere else. So, we have these 4 buckets. So, I'll start off with the active dates, the physically active dates. Like if we're going for a hike or something, make sure you take or have your CGM on or have your blood sugar monitor with you. Have a backpack full of snacks and glucose tablets. Have a protein bar. Just, things that will keep you stable so that you're able to enjoy your physical activity. Do you have anything else to add to that?
No, that's it. Sometimes before in the past, I would eat before I go. I mean, there would be a question. Well, why are you eating? It's like I have to eat because
Yeah.
I might get sick, and then you don't want to take me to the hospital, do you?
Right.
And he was like, no. Okay, so do what you got to do. So yeah.
Like, I also brought you a snack.
Yeah, really. Like I was the one always came with the snacks, Reva.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, wow, man, this is cool. You always got snacks. I'm like, trying to tell you,
Yeah.
always gotta have something prepared.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Next is drinking alcohol. Alcohol is a tricky one. People don't realize that alcohol actually drops your blood sugar. So you could be confused for being drunk or when actually your blood sugar is low. Very different things going on there. So, that's important to explain to your date as well. And to avoid the sugary, carbohydrate heavy type of drinks. I typically stick to a tequila soda or a vodka soda, something with minimal carbs, more like simple sugars in there, and or dry wines like red wine. I don't really do the sugary white wines. What do you do?
I actually don't drink alcohol at all.
Oh yeah.
So but when people ask me about it in peer
Mhm.
support, I always tell them like one good tip is if you're going to drink alcohol, eat something. Eat
Great
something.
point.
Don't just be down in drinks and you haven't eaten anything. So I always tell people that, but yeah, I don't drink at all. Just stay away from it for more than one reason.
My next one was taking your supplies with you. Like, how do you pack for a trip and you're like, you have the check-in option and the or the carry-on option. And if you put all your supplies in your carry-on option, then your date's like, oh, now we got to pay for a checked bag too. Like,
I sometimes it's a pain because I'm one of those girls. I'm a girly girl, but I don't like wearing purses. I don't like. I want my hands free. That's just how I am. I don't want to be carried. Yeah, but like for example, last weekend, me and my family we went camping. So that was like whoa, because I had one bag just for me. Like we only camped like overnight, so everybody else only didn't have to bring a whole lot. But here I go with a bag of stuff. I'm like, well, just in case, I brought my medicine, I brought my blood glucose monitor, I brought extra supplies, I brought snacks, I brought everything. And so they're like, that's all for you. It's like, yeah, I gotta make. I said, hey, we're way out here in the woods, man. We're not gonna go through this crap while we're out here for this weekend. We're supposed to be having fun. So it's almost like even the person dealing with diabetes to some certain extent has to have compassion on the people who are out having fun with you, because if you prepare, they don't have to experience a trauma dealing with you. If you don't prepare, you expose them to possibly dealing with a trauma that they'll probably never forget, and it's a bad memory. So you also got to think about the people you're with too.
Definitely. That's very valuable advice. So with that, I'd like to ask our final question. Serena Valentine, are you single?
Yes, I am. For the time being.
Ladies and gentlemen, be sure to swipe right for the one and only Serena Valentine. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope this was enjoyable. Dating while living with diabetes is a challenge in many ways. We hope that this conversation has opened your eyes to the considerations and maybe even let you know that you're not alone. There are others out there with similar questions and concerns when thinking about or actively involved in relationships. We have a quick survey on YouTube and Facebook where we would like to get your feedback on the program as well as recommendations for future episodes. Please make MyDiabetesHQ Live better by filling out the survey. Mark your calendars. Our next episode will air next Saturday at 10 a.m. Thank you for being part of the MyDiabetesHQ community. We'll see you next time.